Welcome, everybody, to today's Lunch and Learn webinar. I'm excited to have member Hughes Environmental presenting for us today. Scott is going to go over some housekeeping items, so I'll turn it over to Scott now. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Welcome to our webinar on healthy buildings, concentrating on fire and life safety services. We're glad you're here. I'm Scott Waldman, the marketing director for Hughes Environmental. Just a couple of housekeeping announcements before we get going. This webinar will be recorded and delivered via email within 24 hours. All attendees will be muted. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to enter them into your go-to panel. You can enter them either in the question or chat field, and we'll get to those. We'll also wrap up with a Q&A session at the end. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Mary Fromling, who will be presenting today's topic on fire and life safety in industrial settings. So I'm going to give her control.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you very much. Let me bring up the footage and we'll kick this off. Thank you all for your time today. This is an important topic at any time, and at no time has it been more important than right now as we are operating under the guidance of pandemic, and we're sheltering in place in many places, or we're working with modified crews as in our manufacturing settings, and communication of code and safety practices has become much more important and front and center. So today we're going to talk about fire and life safety services as it relates to industrial settings. And the codes are applicable to all occupancy, with some variations on the frequencies of when these systems need to be inspected, but there are no variations on the requirements of how they are to be maintained and inspected. So with that, we're going to talk today about combustible dust remediation, get you a little bit of information on why that matters, rolling overhead fire door inspections, an NFPA requirement that's annual. We're going to briefly touch on arc flash assessments. It's a very large topic. We could actually have an entire hour just on arc flash assessment. And then we're going to talk about fire smoke damper inspections and repairs and fire rated barriers, otherwise known as fire stop, and above ceiling. And then we're also going to talk about safely leaving the building or photoluminescent egress path markers and exit signage. So let's talk about combustible dust remediation, which affects so many of you in manufacturing. And with that, let's talk about NFPA 652. Combustible dust code says that the threshold housekeeping dust accumulation levels and non-routine dust accumulation levels, for instance, process upset, shall be in accordance with relevant industry or commodity-specific NFPA standards. That's a tough one, right? There's a lot of vague information there, but what we're talking about is 132 most material is very small, fine material, and 1/8 for wood and 0 for metal. So what they're saying is that metal being the most serious to be considered. So the dust explosion pentagon is something that we don't like to discuss very often or doesn't get discussed very often. But there are some elements that are needed for a fire, for the fire triangle. So we need to have that fuel, that combustible dust, that wood, that metal, that boxboard dust. There's lots of different material that falls into that category. So we need that fuel. We need a little ignition source, heat, and we need air. We need oxygen in the air, an oxidant. Those are the three things. Those are only the three things that we need in a fire triangle. Additional elements needed for a dust explosion would be dispersion of dust particles in sufficient quantity and concentration, and confinement of the dust cloud. So we can think of lots of areas where that could be possible in any manufacturing setting. So the proper method and equipment for cleaning, general housekeeping, or remediation are explosion-proof vacuums. So these vacuums also have HEPA filtration. They are intrinsically safe and have anti-static equipment. They're grounded, and they're rated for class 1, 2, and 3 environments. These are not pieces of equipment that are readily available at any big box store. These are expensive investments to be made, and you need to receive proper training and wear the proper PPE. And the message that we're trying to convey and share with you is just how serious this effort has to be. And the reason that it has to be at this level is because of the potential for further risk and explosion in a setting where this is present. So we see these explosions throughout the world on a regular basis. They don't necessarily make the evening news unless there is loss of life, but they can be extremely serious, and they can shut down your operation and be extremely costly, as well as providing potential risk for your employees. In our area here in the tri-state, there is a particular facility that does make the evening news occasionally, and it is in Erlanger. And they have worked for years to manage that risk. But in 2003, they had a static charge that sparked an explosion, and the roof caught fire, and the blast blew the back wall of the plant off and injured a worker. He did survive, and they put mitigation methods in place after that. But it wasn't until 2015 that they had another explosion. And sugar is extremely dangerous, as you know, or may not know. But in 2015, the silo exploded and caught fire at the plant. And the dust from the candy making operations was likely the cause of the blast. They had subsequent fire, which burned through panels on the side and back of the building, and they were fortunate that no one was injured. Again, they used the experience to put more safety measures in play, but this continues to be a very volatile type of operation, and they still have risk. And in 2017, they had an additional explosion, and the fire station is not very far away, but they did hear it there. And there were 40 employees at the plant, and manufacturing had to be shut down for the shift. So a lot of risk there, a lot of visibility that was certainly not positive for them on the evening news, and definitely quite an issue. And they work very aggressively to make sure that their facility is maintained, but the risk is still there if they're not keeping up with the general housekeeping to get sugar out of their silos and their bag houses and on the conveyor belts. So industrial settings have a high inventory of rolling fire doors and dropping fire doors. And we want to talk about that. We're seeing a lot of interest and inquiries as relates to industrial and manufacturing settings. And there's a lot of lack of understanding of the code. The code has been enforced for decades. It's been there, and it's been a requirement, but we're seeing more awareness as related to manufacturing and industrial settings. So the code says, NFPA Fire Code requires that fire-rated doors be tested for functionality no less than annually, and that a written record of the inspection be kept on file for the authority having jurisdiction. Not only do they need to be tested, but they need to be maintained and repaired. And this becomes very problematic for facilities that may have legacy doors in place that maybe the parts are not available and they're hard to maintain. But make no mistake, this is an annual requirement that all occupied facilities must have rolling and dropping fire doors inspected and documented annually. So when we're inspecting a rolling overhead fire door, NFPA requires the rolling steel fire doors and sliding fire doors be inspected and tested at the minimum of once a year. They need to be operable. Then we need to make sure that there's nothing blocking those doors and that there is a replacement that is available in the event that the door is not operating. And they also have to be labeled with the right certification labels for rolling doors, fire shutters, and fire protective openings. So we know that in manufacturing and industrial settings, these doors get a lot of abuse, and they are critical to saving life, and they do need to be maintained and operating. So fire door recertification, as you see in the top left, is a compliance piece that is little understood and gets a lot of attention from not only authorities having jurisdiction, but also insurance companies and others that are auditing your facility. And if you are not capable of showing that there is a label on the frame and the door, then your door is out of compliance. So the major components of the fire door that must have a label are the fire rated door, the door frame, and the kick plate. If this label is old and worn or painted over, it is out of compliance. If it is missing, it is out of compliance, and you need to get your door inspected and recertified or relabeled. We're using an assisted living facility in Detroit to talk about a complete fire door inspection. I do have, case studies with large industrial and manufacturing, but we thought this really showed all of the NFPA compliance. So for this case study, we're talking about a 40,000 square foot assisted living facility, and it had never had a complete fire door inspection, and they needed to get their inventory completed, and they needed to be in compliance quickly. They had a CMS audit coming, and they needed to make sure that they were in compliance and could also prove that they were in compliance. So we knew that the fire doors had never been inspected, and that the facility was going to be looking at significant repairs. So we did this as turnkey. They did not know how many doors they had as well. They didn't have life safety drawings as well, which is also a requirement as per the code. But the inspection was completed quickly, and the repairs were documented, and all of the doors were brought into compliance, giving the protection that the facility needed. But these fire door inspections, while might be affordable on the inspection phase, on a per door inspection, can be very expensive investment for repairs, and it can be a significant impact to your budget or to your contingency funding. So it is very important that you stay compliant and that you maintain the inspections annually, so that you don't find yourself in a situation where you're have an audit coming up and you're faced with having to make major repairs. But when we get into rolling fire doors and dropping doors, those are also significant repairs, or in many cases replacements. So you want to stay on top of this so that you're not faced with in many cases, a 5-figure or 6-figure door repair. And you ultimately need to be able to provide proper egress in your facility and know that these doors are sound. Arc flash assessment, as I said, we were briefly going to touch on this, but I was brought into recently a situation where arc flash code was not being maintained, NFPA 70E. And assessments had not been performed, proper documentation had not been made, and the safety precautions had not been put into place, and there was significant impact to an employees, not only the employees that were injured, but also to the sound and the well-being, and the workplace continuity was deeply impacted because employees did not want to go back to work, and they did not want to go back to work until NFPA 70E had been maintained, also facing serious lawsuits as a result if they're not able to provide that documentation that they had met the guidelines. But the code outlines that the assessment should be formed, including how to determine the arc flash hazard exists, what the arc flash boundaries are, and what the appropriate PPE is to don given the boundaries, method, and protection of the workers in the event of an incident, and how to properly label hazards to alert workers of the hazards and boundaries. So this is very specific and very unique to each application, and it needs to be taken very serious, not just for safety of the employees, but also peace of mind as well. So this is definitely something that every facility needs to make sure that they can put their hands on and that they fully understand, especially in facilities where you may have equipment that has been in place and you have your arc flash assessments in place and you have your training, but you're now bringing in new equipment. You need to make sure that the NFPA 70 codes are met with the new equipment and that the proper training and handling is in place as well for safety of everyone involved. Arc flash is a phenomenon where a flashover electrical current leaves its intended path and travels through the air from one conductor to another or to the ground. The results are often violent, and when a human is in close proximity to the arc flash, serious injury and even death can occur, as defined by OSHA. In the case that I was talking about, the arc flash occurred in a parking structure with a piece of equipment that was in the parking structure. When you're in arc flash compliance and you're going through the process, data collection is key. Energy calculations must be performed. Coordination, study, and mitigation, field labeling, and safety training must be provided and must be ongoing and consistent. A customer success story, we were contacted by an acute care hospital in Ohio that received $250,000 of citations from OSHA after an electrical contract incident at their site. This is a different case, by the way. The hospital had no energy management program in place. And by implementing a full electrical safety program to OSHA, the hospital was able to get the citation lowered down to $100,000, a significant reduction. We made the facilities significantly safer for all employees and vendors that have contact with any of the electrical components inside the hospital. And we're able to communicate that to give not only the employees, but the vendors peace of mind as well, so that they could be confident that they were in a safe environment going forward. So fire and smoke damper inspections and repairs are another piece of the NFPA requirement that doesn't get the education that it deserves. And the frequencies that are required for occupancies for industrial and manufacturing are every 4 years, and then every year after an installation in a facility. So it's a little bit less on everyone's radar. But it is extremely important that those devices, fire smoke dampers, are inspected and maintained and that you have documentation. Again, every 4 years for non-healthcare facilities, that's industrial manufacturing and commercial occupancy. And if you make any changes to your facility, then the first year after they're installed, they must be inspected. And by inspected, what the code says is that dynamic fire dampers, those are the ones that you see in the top left image there, these systems are put in place so that where HVAC system fan will continue to blow, they need to be inspected. They actually need to be physically operated and documented and demonstrated that they can function in the event of a fire. Static fire dampers are installed in a fire-rated barrier where an HVAC fan system will be shut off. So they're fire dampers. They're both fire dampers. One's dynamic and one's static. And they both need to be inspected every 4 years and the first year after they're installed. You need to be able to show that they can operate. You need to be able to demonstrate and report that the fusible link is operational. Smoke dampers, also part of your fire-rated barrier, are pneumatic actuators where they need air to function properly, and electrical actuators that need power to function properly. They also need to be inspected every 4 years for the occupancy that we're talking about for industrial and manufacturing, and they also need to be inspected after the first year that they've been installed. But what you need to know on smoke dampers, oftentimes, whether the facility is new or whether the facility has been around for decades, we see failure with pneumatic actuators where the air lines have not been maintained, or maybe they've never been even attached to the smoke damper. And the electrical actuators, the same causation that we see, that maybe they haven't been connected and they haven't been maintained, or maybe they have failed because if they have been installed accurately, they're still under power 365 days a year, and they tend to fail. So we see a high rate of failure with smoke dampers, which means that your facility is not in compliance and not as safe as it needs to be with these items that are not maintained. So this is really critical that we make sure that those are inspected first year after installation, because even with fire dampers, dynamic and static, we can see them being installed improperly. They get installed in crooked and they won't operate. There's a lot of different things that we see. So that first year is critical so we can go in and see that a job well done. And then every 4 years after that, we can make sure that those dampers are still in compliance and still active and ready to do their job when called into action. So the marketing team at Hughes Environmental thought it would be good if we share a luxury resort in Nassau, Bahamas, because wouldn't we all like to be there right now? But I think this is a great case in point because, first of all, again, people are having to shelter in place. You find these dampers when a building is highly compartmentalized, and you might have just the same type of design wherever you are at your facility, especially if you operate a data center, or maybe you're in a high-tech manufacturing operation and you have closed rooms where you have very sensitive operations going on. So you always need to remember that when you have those types of settings, you have a lot of these devices, potentially have a lot of these devices, and they need to work so that your employees can either shelter in place in the event of a fire or they can exit safely in the event of a fire. So I think that, you know, showing and sharing a property that had 500 fire and smoke dampers that needed to be inspected is really it's a good opportunity for us to talk about just how important these are and the potential to failure. So this facility had never had them inspected. They didn't do the 1-year inspection, and this happens to be a setting where they were in high salt water, being by the beach. But if you're in a manufacturing setting with high heat or high humidity, which many of you out there on this presentation could be, that you need to understand that these dampers suffer rust, corrosion, and other situations just like this setting might. And that we saw a high failure rate. In this case, we saw some of them were completely rusted over, rusted in place. So we went in and inspected these, documented these, and were able to repair all the rusted dampers and replace the failed dampers. And we were able to bring them back into compliance to 100% and put them on the track for a maintenance program as well. We followed all the NFPA recommendations, which says that you must inspect and maintain and keep a schedule. In this case, we went in and had to lubricate the dampers, again, high humidity and high moisture. And we worked with the HVAC contractor on place to remove the moisture from the HVAC system. And now this project that we're demonstrating, I don't think we put in UVC in their HVAC, but also another opportunity to be able to look at fully bringing your HVAC into compliance and making an even more safe environment with indoor air quality by putting in UVC. So as we talk about the fire-rated barrier, again, there is a code that is in place, and that is in place for all occupancies, including industrial and manufacturing, not just acute healthcare and healthcare. And so the fire stopping code, and this is, we're looking at International Building Code, requires that routine maintenance be made of fire barrier walls. Walls should be properly repaired when damaged, altered, or breached or penetrated. Any penetrations found should be repaired with approved methods capable of resisting the passage of fire and smoke. So what this really is saying that you must be maintained at all times. There is no frequency that is given like there is for annual for doors and every 4 years for dampers. This says that you must be maintained at all times, much like combustible dust, where you must be maintained at all times. So it's really critical that you understand how your building is constructed, where your fire-rated barriers are, and that you have a program in place And in this case, we're saying that much like many facilities that you would use a third party to make sure that you are being surveyed routinely, and that your third party trained and licensed contractor is making sure that they're making the fire stop repairs, and then they're making sure that in this case where we're looking at above ceiling, the code also says that you have to have proper fire stopping on all junction boxes, so that many times when we go above ceilings in all occupancies, we see that junction boxes are overlooked. This is really an opportunity for the AHJ for code violation, no matter what the application is. They are looking for junction boxes to be in compliance. And when an above ceiling survey is completed, we can make sure that those are brought into compliance while we're there on site. When we do an above ceiling survey for fire stopping, we're also going to make sure that we're removing wires from sprinkler lines and hangers. This is a very misunderstood piece of the compliance, and I'm sure that we've all seen it. We've seen wires that are wrapped around sprinkler lines, and all kinds of different various things that we have multiple trades in the building that don't understand the life safety code. It's an easy place for people to forget that there might be a requirement involved. So when we're doing an above ceiling survey, this is our opportunity to go in and make sure that that is corrected. We are using NFPA approved, code approved zip ties to tie up and connect above ceiling. So there's a lot that can be out of place and out of compliance above ceiling, and you need to have be able to demonstrate that you have surveyed those areas. So another customer success story for a not-for-profit. We're seeing more and more of this, by the way, not just on healthcare, but also on other occupancies where compliance is being called out and very stiff guidelines are being made, and you have very limited time to get your fire stopping into compliance. So in this case, 1 million square feet is a pretty standard for a large acute hospital. We were brought in to completely open up and survey above ceiling and also repair and replace to bring them into compliance quickly. And we documented, photographed, and repaired all of those items that we were talking about, as well as larger areas where penetrations or maybe firewall was actually missing, that we were able to repair that. So it's not just healthcare that is being looked at for compliance here, and we see a lot of opportunity to bring this service into industrial and manufacturing for to bring firewalls back into compliance. So another area for egress and proper safety within your building is photoluminescence. And photoluminescence code, we really saw that come into play after 9/11 as it relates to buildings that are multiple stories. But when I think about large manufacturing, I've been in the business for 32 years, and I've been in numerous types of settings. And oftentimes, since I'm in the safety business, I am most concerned with how I'm going to egress a building. And photoluminescence gives the ability to make sure that low maintenance markings, to make sure that in the event of loss of power and catastrophic loss of services, that people would be able to exit a building safely. So we're able to provide that for you as well. And the code is definitely, there's a lot of education. It's enforced more in settings that are highly compartmentalized and hard to navigate with a lot of vendors or visitors in a building. But make no mistake that it's an important piece of getting someone out of your building safely. There's a lot of benefits for photoluminescence, taking out costly electrical signs. There are LEED credits that are available, and they don't require the maintenance or the inspection. You do need to make sure that you're keeping your inspection to make sure that the signs are still in place. But these are great little tools, and we're going to see this more and more as buildings are being upgraded or built. This is a success story again, where we were brought in to provide LEED green points for new construction, and we were able to bring in credit for using our services. So we were able to put in photoluminescence, egress path markings, mostly on the stairwells and exits there, and providing multiple LEED green credits. So I know these are all, each and every one of these topics amongst themselves is, you know, a much greater conversation. We would like to have that conversation with you if you need clarity on the codes as they relate to NFPA fire codes. We are here to answer those questions for you. You can always go to our hughesenv.com website, or you can submit into our info@hughesenv.com. And then we have our 24-hour 888 number. We also have an option for COVID response if you need attention for immediate COVID response, deep cleaning, or protection. So any of these topics, we're available for you at any time. And we really thank you for your interest and your time today. Scott, do we have any questions?
We do not have any questions yet, but I've opened it up to our attendees. They're unmuted, so if they would like to ask any questions, they may do so at this time. And I don't know if any of our other panelists have any comments, and we'll just see if we have any questions or comments.
Hi, Mary, I have a question.
Yes, sir. Yes, Wes.
Are there companies that can help to analyze dust to determine if it is combustible?
Absolutely. I mean, we didn't have that on this slide, Wes. I know that you deal with that quite a lot when you're out in the field with your projects, but yes, you can turnkey the project and use a third party for dust hazard analysis so that you can prepare the right scope of work and handling.
And do you all see combustible dust issues inside ductwork as well as outside in the ceiling and rafters of facilities?
Yeah, absolutely. And as we're installing a lot of UVC across the country for industrial and maintenance customers, we are setting a baseline. So we're going in and cleaning the ductwork, analyzing it, and then cleaning the ductwork, and then installing the UVC as well. So it's a great opportunity to do that right now at this time.
Thank you.
And we realize that the questions you might have are specific only to your facility. So again, please find us either by phone, email, or website, and we're happy to help you any way we can. Thank you. Thank you, Scott.
All right, if there are no more questions at this time, we're going to go ahead and end the webinar for everybody. Thank you so much for attending and taking a little time out to listen to this important topic. And anybody who is an attendee or a registrant will get this recording delivered via email within 24 hours. So we really thank you again and hope you all have a nice day. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Stay safe.